I'm Jeff Cook,
And I'm TJ Wilson.
and this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram is a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name is Jeff Cook. I am a philosopher, pastor, writer in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is the TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
My man.
Hey.
We are a third of the way through our deep dive into the basics
Yep.
of each of the types.
Yeah.
We have both, when not recording, said these aren't really that basic.
Right. Yeah.
Perhaps we should call these skeletons.
Sure.
I think that there is like some bones that make up the types, and then you have your personality, your nuances, your ticks, all that. That's kind of flesh. That makes you you. It's kind of overlaid on top of your type.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Is that going to work as a metaphor?
Sure.
We'll go with it for now.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
made that up
It's
just in the
more
last 5
robust
seconds.
than the word basics.
Yes, because we actually are going some places.
Yeah.
And today we're going some places with the fours.
Fours.
Love the fours in my life. I imagine you do too.
It's true. Fours are my favorite.
Fours are like 3/4 of your staff at your
Yeah,
coffee
right.
shop. Is
Yeah. I'm a
Or at
four
least-
magnet, I guess.
So what do you appreciate most about the fours?
I like that fours do not settle for the ordinary, and I mean that in a multitude of ways. One of the biggest ones is that like the fours that I know don't settle for accepting fine as an answer.
Ooh,
Like
yeah.
like they want to push into how people actually are.
Yes.
And like, so I'm really good at the customer service face, and the fours in my life are like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm great. And they're like, how are you really? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, we're going to talk. Okay, I'm in. Yeah. I love
and
that.
since you're at a coffee shop anyway,
It's great.
you
It's
might as well
perfect.
go
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I agree on that front. Like the fours who are able to pull out stuff from me. You'll know this since I'm a 1. I actually have some standards about how I want to come across in the world.
No,
And
not you.
There is something about fours where they will push a button and then all of a sudden just lumps of toxic waste start spilling out. It's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
But this is routinely my experience of healthy fours in my life who not only are able to extract the toxic waste, but to go, hey, this is good.
Yep.
This is how it should be.
Yep. Yeah. Let's be real for a second.
It is, man.
It's good.
And of course, the fours in my life have the best Spotify lists.
Naturally.
And
Yeah.
so I just befriend them and then I start subscribing to everything that they're listening to.
Carefully cultivated lists that help us know how to feel.
Makes me, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on fours in your life? Those were the 2 big things for me: Spotify
like
and
'em.
toxic waste.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as we've discussed before, the Enneagram is about all sorts of things, but one of the big things is that it is about the goal of human life, and that goal is joy. And today we're talking about the road to joy and what that looks like for fours. So we're going to pitch a few dozen truths or so about the fours. Here are things that many who have studied have unveiled about the heart and perspective of fours. And we're going to go down that path where we're looking at not only the motive, but how that motive turns dark and becomes the shadow of a four. But we want to see what it looks like to come out of that shadow, to have a wake up and to move into places of joy and health. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So let's jump in.
All right. Let's do it.
We're talking about the fours. What are some names for fours?
We like the artist, the melancholic. The other one's good. Romantic individualist is the one that we sort of came up with. We see a lot of the individualists in the expression of fours. We want to stray away from that, so we'll get into that more as we unpack this.
So this is a good thing. You will know, perhaps if you've listened to most of our podcasts, that oftentimes we're discovering things on the fly as we banter.
Right.
And some of the things that you and I have discovered is things we don't like,
Right.
descriptions we don't like
Yep.
about each of the types or the way that things have been phrased. And that's true here. So I heard you say this for the first time this last week of not liking this title for fours.
Right.
So why don't you like the individualist?
Because it for me it implies that fours are trying to be unique, and I think that's part of the presentation of what fours are. They want to be unique. They want to stand out. They want to be individuals. But I think that's wrong. We'll talk about this with eights. We'll talk about this with sixes. But with fours in particular, I think that their thing stems from their intuitive sense of their own individuality, and they want to be true to that. It's not that they want to be unique. It's that they know that they are already.
This, by the way, has been trademarked by T.J. Wilson because this is, in my mind, the best description of the motive of a four, and I just haven't seen it anywhere else. There's perhaps the easy step. I see this a lot with ones, the easy step of just saying, oh, well, they're the perfectionist, and this is what this looks like. And I don't think it gets to the core of what's
No,
there.
it's not.
And it's the same here with the fours. That seems to me to get to the core heart of a four. It's I have a sense of my own uniqueness, and honesty compels me. Perhaps is it honesty that compels the need to be authentic into the world? Okay, so let's go here real quick. There is a felt sense of one's own uniqueness, but there's something that complements that in terms of propelling that forward. I need to be true to myself. Is that honesty?
It's a devotion to authenticity, and I think they're part of the same coin.
Yeah.
Because the expression of one's own uniqueness is about being true. Being true is about recognizing that
There it is. Yeah.
we are all individuals.
It's almost a noun verb kind of thing. I am unique noun. I will be true verb. And
Yeah.
those go together. I think that's spot on. As such, fours are going to believe that they are good when they're true to themselves.
Right.
Fours are part of the heart triad. This is their intelligence center. Intelligence center is how you perceive the world. And fours taking the world through their heart. You want to talk about the heart triad?
Yeah. So this is the feeling space. This is taking in information through that feeling center. It's about emotion, sentimentality, the relation to one another with a focus on attention. This and fours, their focus is much more sort of inward.
Yep.
Yeah. Twos, their attention is entirely about other people.
Presenting their selves outward.
Right. And focused on other people.
Yeah.
Threes is sort of a balanced, what do other people want me to be? Fours are much more focused on themselves, and not necessarily in a selfish way. It can be that sort of like narcissistic inward focus, but this is part of that uniqueness, authenticity piece, is that being internally focused, they are much more in tune with who they are, how they feel, and they want to be expressing that in true ways.
Yeah. All these types are going to feel social pressure. And that can materialize inside themselves as shame. So 2s, 3s, and 4s, all the heart triad are going to struggle with shame. How does that materialize in the life of a 4?
So 4s, because of their sense of uniqueness, because they understand that they are different from everyone else, they sort of look out at the world and see the ways that they don't fit in perfectly. So their shame materializes in this sense of envy. They look at people who do fit and say, why not me? They think they are inherently deficient in some way, and that is what makes them not fit in everywhere else.
Talk about the balance there between feeling deficient and yet having an understanding that one is unique and valuable. Well, valuable may be a stretch there, huh?
Well, this is, I think it's the same thing, just one version is healthy, the other version is unhealthy.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So in the unhealthy expression, 4s look out at the world and see the places that they don't fit in. They say, why not me? And they think that it is their fault that they are not like everyone else.
Right.
In healthy ways, they recognize that they are unique just like everyone else, and everyone else has their place, and they have their place as well.
Right. There you go. That's going to be our whole podcast on 4s right there.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll plumb the depths of that. So 4s are on the line. If you look at the Enneagram figure, they're on the line between the heart and head triad. I suppose there's the gap.
The existential gap.
Between. But they, primary center is going to be their heart. Their secondary center will be their head. And so they feel their thoughts.
Right.
Do you want to talk about that in the life of 4?
I think saying they feel their thoughts is actually a pretty good way of thinking about that. A lot of 4s will describe, once they start doing some of the work and get words to be able to express this, they'll describe that they have a sense that they are their feelings. And it's because they feel first. They process the world through that space of feelings. So their thoughts, their actions, their expressions, all of those things start in the feeling place. And so they will have more of a sense of how they feel about whatever is going on, whatever thoughts they have, than they will actually processing the data.
Mm-hmm. Shame is a past feeling, as we've talked about before. But moving to stance, the stance for the 4s is to withdraw.
Right.
And withdrawing types are also past-oriented.
Right.
So this is the one type that is both past in their intelligence center and past-oriented in their stance. I was going to use that as a bridge, but that would seem to me that has the potential for being a very difficult place to be, I imagine.
Sure.
In the same way that I suppose 7s who are future,
or 1s who are present.
Well, see, I like being right here, right now. They are withdrawing for attention, and let's talk about stance. I suppose we can come back to orientation to time in a minute, but their stance is to withdraw in order to get the attention that they desire. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, 4s, 5s, and 9s all withdraw, and this is sort of about the way that we relate to others and a lot of the circumstances and situations in our lives. 4s, 5s, and 9s will sort of take a step back. And this is about not doing the thing that we know that we're supposed to do, or needing space to figure out what we're supposed to do. So we withdraw from situations. 4s are going to, because their focus is on attention, they're going to step back in order to focus on their feelings. And it is possible. It is common that 4s will step back in order to get other people to pay attention to them, but that's more of a sort of manipulation move. The good version is stepping back to discern how I feel about the situation, to spend time in the reality of my feelings at that moment.
Yeah. Riso and Hudson say that 4s present their self-image inwardly as a
Mhm.
different, as a contrast to 2s and 3s.
Yeah.
And how they present their self-image. So how then would that work in terms of their stance and intelligence? They're both focusing backward,
So with past being
past. That's what I mean.
past being the focus, their shame exists in the past. Something has been done to me, or I have done things that have made me deficient. That is what shame is about. And because of that withdrawing place, they are naturally going to withdraw to examine what has happened in the past. How have I dealt with this in the past? And to focus on the things that have happened that have brought me to this place. So I feel this way about the circumstances because of where I've come from.
As such, 4s, 5s, and 9s in the withdrawn stance are going to be action repressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine their action repression would come exactly out of that space.
Yep.
Of being
Yeah.
stuck in the past and not being able to engage their body, get out of their imagination, move into spaces.
Yeah,
where they're
exactly
acting on
right.
their
Yeah.
thoughts.
And it's almost a fear of future possibilities that prevents all of the withdrawn types have this sort of sense of not knowing what's coming, and that is part of what prevents us from action. For 4s, it has a lot to do with being focused on the internal space that prevents me from moving into new places.
Yeah. Moving into the harmony triad then and how we connect to the world, does their idealism come in here as a anchor, as something that's going to keep them from actually moving into their body? I have an idealistic picture of how things should go internally that might be, that would stagnating.
I think that idealism is in part of that shame piece, is wanting to live up to an ideal that I can't possibly attain. And that has to do, like, that is where envy creeps in. And but it's also, so I think 1s think about the way the world should be, 7s think about the way the world could be, and 4s think about how I ought to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that there is a best way to do this, and that again draws in that authenticity piece. Is I want to make sure that that I am being the most true I possibly can be.
That's interesting. I always read the idealism of a 4 as a relational idealism.
Mm-hmm.
That I have visions of how my connections with others should be. It's not an either or, I guess. It could be a both and, that you have
Right.
ideals about yourself, but you also have ideals about your connections.
Well, and within that connection, being as true to myself and cultivating authenticity in that relationship.
Yeah.
Because if our interactions are not as real as they could be, then we're just lying.
Yeah.
And 4s aren't interested in lying.
What does it look like for a 4 to grow in relationships there then? So say it's the case that I have an idealistic sense of who I am uniquely.
Mm-hmm.
That picture, that self-image may be quite skewed or juvenile.
Sure.
What does it look like for an idealistic sort? I suppose this would be true of all the idealistic sorts, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You have a vision of the ideal
Yeah.
that you need to be self-conscious of because it
Yeah.
might be wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for 7s and 4s. 1s generally get it right.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Right. Of course they do.
Okay, that was a dumb joke. Growth. Growth about one's own self-understanding. What does that look like
Mhm.
for a 4?
Well, I think we'll talk about this more, but there's a sense of needing to let go of that idealism, of accepting, of leaning into the truth of who you are,
Yes.
and not expecting that you are supposed to be a certain way.
Yeah.
You are who you are right now, and that's
had-
okay.
I had not thought about this. This is where the liberation is.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is a big idea for us, which I hadn't put it with the affect groups. But that's where the liberation is. It's if each of the types surrender their affect, then they're actually released. So the 1, 4, 7 who have ideals of a certain sort,
Mhm.
if they're able to transcend those, hold them loosely,
Yeah.
move away from them,
Yeah.
they actually have a ton of leverage.
Right.
So the 369, if you surrender your attachments, it frees you to live in a detached. You can focus on whether you're healthy,
Mhm.
and so too with 2s, 5s, and 8s. They repress their inner life. You get rid of that, you allow your inner life to flourish. There's some stuff there.
Yeah.
Something there.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to write that down. We'll do a podcast on that in
Well,
2
and-
or 3 years.
And thinking about like idealists, 1s, 4s, and 7s who are in that frustration space, the idealism can never be reached. Therefore, they are frustrated.
Yeah.
It's also the case that like I know that a lot of people listening, and I know that this is at least in the back of your mind as we're talking about this, but letting go of your idealism does not necessarily mean not striving for the best possible thing. Letting go of your idealism might mean something more like aim for the moon. If you miss, you'll at least hit the stars. Like being comfortable with not reaching your idealism is the goal here.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to give up striving for a better world for all of us to live in. Not being attached to the outcome is a better goal.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the coping styles then.
Okay.
When solving a problem, I feel like it is the final wall before you go into your stress number.
Okay.
So you are in your primary type,
Mm-hmm.
emotive, and you want something.
Yeah.
And when you don't get it, your coping style kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
When your coping style fails,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go to the behavior and methods of a different type. And I think there's a wall there. So I'll play this out with 4s, but
Sure.
the coping style for a 4, how 4s solve problems is the emotional response triad. They share this with 4s, 6s, and 8s.
Mm-hmm.
That is when something doesn't go the way that the 4 wants, they don't get what they want. They are going to emotionally respond to it. You want to talk about how that works for a 4?
Yeah. Coping styles, just in case you haven't listened to our Coping Styles podcast, this is about how we fight, how we react when we don't get the things that we want, how we engage in conflict, particularly with other people. And in the emotional response group, it is very much as simple as it sounds. It is about the emotional place of between me and you. It's I want you to know how I feel, and I want you to express how you feel, and I want you to express that you understand how I feel. Really, I want you to feel the way that I do about this.
Yeah.
The conflict that we are solving is the emotional relationship between us.
Because there's a desire for attention still going on with the 4 in particular here.
Yeah.
So I want you to feel the same way I do about myself, perhaps.
And about the thing that we're fighting about, and
But I mean, so for a 4 who is longing to be significant, to at least to find their significance, create out of that space of authenticity, if they get emotional
mhm.
because they're not gaining that, it would be, I want you to see that I'm unique in this space, correct?
Mhm. And validate my feelings.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the words that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
When that doesn't work for the 4, the
Mhm.
emotional side doesn't work, then it seems to me, what's your next step? Well, your next step is pushing into the unhealthy side of the 2
Sure.
and really becoming demanding for the love and affection of the people around you.
Sure.
You know what I mean there?
Yeah.
It seems like there's something to be said here. I'm playing this thought out, but
Yeah.
there seems to be something there about the arrows, that the coping style is that last barrier before you go down the arrow.
Sure.
Any last words on the coping style for fours?
I think our coping styles episode is really valuable in this way, just like focusing on each coping styles and how they pair together. I think it's really important to acknowledge that if you have a different kind of coping style from the emotional response, you might be shooting past each other when you are fighting. And fours are looking for an emotional response from the people that they are in an argument with.
Mm.
And that is really important to know about fours.
There was one quote about coping style for fours that stood out to me, at least in terms of a problem, that fours often have difficulty balancing both their need for self-determination and their need for support. I thought that was real insightful in terms of just, I don't know that that's a problem to solve. That's a tension to manage in the heart of a four.
Right.
It's like, I need self-determination, but I also need support. And sometimes those are in conflict.
Yeah.
And being able to navigate those waters, I imagine, can be quite tricky.
Yeah.
And that's why the emotional response may be the go-to here.
Mhm.
It's like, if you can express that, both that authentic piece and at the same time, this is what I need from you.
Yeah.
I imagine that would be real helpful.
Yeah.
Pushing into the shadow side
Yep.
of the fours, we want to elevate those places of unhealth in each of the types. And we're starting with fears. And this is a place that TJ and I recently have really gotten into as being the first step or the first domino into your shadow side. Often comes out of your fears. And so the fear for fours is that they don't have an identity or personal significance of their own.
Right.
And that may even spill out as a, disdainful posture towards others who they want to make feel like they're nobody or that they have no value.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and this is where I think this is the place where that idea that fours need to express their own uniqueness, they need to be unique. I think this is where that comes from, because if I feel like in the core of me I don't have any significance, then I will present myself in ways that gain me significance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
So like the wearing the fancy clothes and not fancy, but different than everyone else, expressing myself in different ways than whatever's around me. Yeah, it's sort of a opposite reaction to this sense of insignificance. And this is, like, we've talked about this. This is the place where where envy and the shame lives and comes from and becomes stronger, is that they feel like they do not have their own significance. They fear that in the core of them.
Yeah.
So
this fear, we have begun to use the language that this fear can work its way into your heart. And when it does, then the fear of the heart is going to materialize in the heart as a sin or a passion. The traditional lists for the Enneagram, and for fours, that's envy, as you were saying. That envy sees the differences between myself and the others,
right.
and they have something that you don't.
Right. Yeah. That's what makes them fit into the places where I feel like I don't quite fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Envy in the heart spills into the head of a four as.
It becomes melancholy.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I feel like that seems pretty straightforward. When you spend time in envy, when you spend time looking at the world around you and seeing the places that you don't fit in and wondering why not me, then you gain an internal sense of sadness and sort of a sadness as a state of being.
Yeah. And we'll know this in terms of fours, melancholy spilling over into their behavior as it manifests as like a self-pity,
right,
or a despairing posture toward the world. And that's, as we go down that rabbit trail, that is the unhealthy side
Right.
of this type. It's worth naming. It's worth understanding. It's worth saying, I understand when I go down these places that this is me at my worst. Riso and Hudson, again, in their book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, have a list about eating disorders and addictions. And these often come in to our lives when we're at our most unhealthy. And so they say of fours, fours will overindulge in rich food and sweets, use of alcohol to alter mood, to socialize, and for emotional consolation. There's a lack of physical activity, bulimia, depressants, tobacco, prescription drugs, heroin for social anxiety. That was a jump. I just started with some Camel cigarettes, and then I'm mainlining heroin. Cosmetic surgeries to erase rejected features. Anything that strike you in that paragraph?
Yeah, there's a lot of things here that are sort of the mood altering kind of.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. But notice that it's not a lot of uppers. Like
True, right?
like rich food and sweets, like they don't the richness of the kind of things that they're describing is going to give you a down feel.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of a filling up kind of sense. And all of these things is
It's living in that down
right.
state.
Right.
Let's talk about that for a while. I know what that's like again because in my stress number, but how do you interpret that in terms of the fours desire? Kurt Cobain famously says, I miss the comfort of being sad.
Yeah.
That strikes me as a desirable location for many fours.
I think that part of it is that the easy and common answer is that the fours feel so comfortable in their sadness, in grief, in harder emotions, partly because that is a true expression of how they feel, and so why we wouldn't want to try and get away from that. So fours are really good at being in grief, and they don't need you to fix your grief. They can sit with you in it. That's a great thing about fours. It's also the case that we live in a society that is constantly pushing us to not be sad.
Yeah. There you
go. So our world is surrounded by ways to make us happy and push us away from our sadness and the darkness and we are constantly bombarded with different ways to chase that fleeting thing that is happiness.
Nobody's selling cigarettes with pictures of really depressed people.
No, they're selling. They want you to think that this is what's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
That's what advertising is. It's going to fulfill you and make you happy and a more whole
Yeah.
person.
Here's the road to joy. It's with this purchase. Good.
Fours, I would be willing to bet that most fours can see those kinds of tactics as manipulation, can see and have an unconscious sense of reacting against that.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm gonna show you that I reject your manipulation techniques.
This thing over here isn't real. And so we're going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and there it is. That's good as well. Yeah. So I'm gonna double down on the things that even when they're very, very, very dark, I'm going to double down here and elevate them because
it's real.
It's real, and it is bringing wholeness to the whole world because you all are overemphasizing the happiness. And so this needs to get lifted up as well.
Yep.
So that there is equanimity, which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
Come on. Again, a list that we like is from Riso and Hudson. They say, I'll become present to my life only when, and for fours, it's I'll become present to my life only when I have completely resolved all of my emotional issues and have found my true significance, when I am completely free to express all my feelings with everyone whenever I want, then I will show up.
And again, as with all of us, you're chasing the wind here. These are goals that you will never achieve, and you're reaching for an end that is actually the means to get to what you're trying to achieve.
So when we have spun this with the other types, there is something to be said about the opposite. It's when I rest and show up and become present, I will begin to recognize that I have resolved my emotional issues
Right.
and have found my significance,
Right.
and that I am free to express my feelings when it's best.
Yeah.
And there is something about the pausing, stillness, Sabbath that is for the hero. Its prescription for fours is to rest in solitude, I
Yeah.
want to say. And so if the four takes time to simply be alone and to rest in that solitude, this should be part of the discovery.
Yeah. And that's taking that a step further. That's also resting from dissecting your own feelings. Like step away from the whirlpool that is your feelings for a second.
Yeah.
Because
Can you have
what you're trying to do is reach some type of emotional ideal.
Can you have solitude from yourself?
So someone brought this up recently and asked about they like to go hiking and they like to get some music, put in their headphones and just go for a hike. And this is a great way for them to sort of experience solitude. This is an excellent option for a sort of contemplative practice. For fours, though, because they spend so much time in their feelings, putting in music and going for a hike is actually another way to focus on their feelings, because music is one of the ways that we know how to feel.
Mm-hmm.
This is how TV shows and movies use music. This is why fours are so good at cultivating playlists. It's because music helps guide how we feel. So maybe for fours, a better way to do this is to listen to white noise. Because you need to get a little bit more into your head. You need to get a little bit more into your body. You need to stop focusing on your feelings, because all you're doing is ruminating in those waters.
Yeah, I like that as a get into your head and body,
Mm-hmm.
the active side there.
Yeah. And so that idea that you were, if you will only become present to your life when you've completely resolved all of your emotional issues, you won't ever be present to your life.
Mm-hmm.
Ruminating on your emotional issues is preventing you from being present.
There it is. Yeah. Another set list we like are wake up calls. Some of the things that I was finding in a handful of books is that the signal to a four that they are entering spaces of unhealth may be things like holding on to and intensifying feelings through their imaginations.
Mm-hmm.
Jump in here at any point if you got thoughts.
Imaginary arguments is a great and terrible place for force.
Ooh, damn. All
Yeah.
right. An impressive sense of alienation from self and others. There it is again, like your relationship to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like an oxymoron, like because yourself is yourself, but you have a relationship to yourself.
Right.
Dependence on others with unstable relationships. Talk about that, because I see that, but I don't know what to say in terms of a four who
Mm-hmm.
would place themselves in those sorts of situations where they're dependent on others who clearly have unhealthy relationships elsewhere.
Well, I think this is part of. We see this trope. It's not really spelled out, but it's a great trope in sort of the romantic comedy world, and the unrequited love expression. Like you have the people that constantly are attaching themselves to the wrong person, and it has to do with, if I can fix them, if I can get them to love me, then I'll never be alone.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that going to two, or is that, we're going to talk about this extensively in the future because somebody opened up a whole can for us, but going to the negative side of your security number, is it the case that in that situation they are trying to improve someone, but this actually is a very bad way to be in the world. You know where I'm going there? Going to 2 in terms of please love me, but going, I'm going to fake like I'm secure in this relationship. And what that looks like is trying to improve this person who's deeply unhealthy.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that absolutely can go there, but as a sort of more subtle expression of that, I think that 4s being comfortable in those places, in the places of sort of the darker emotions, they're naturally drawn to people who are in those kinds of places. Yeah. And so it's often the case that if you're not a 4, and sometimes if you are a 4, if you are spending time in the darker side, there's a reasonable chance that there's some unhealth represented there for whatever reason. It could be circumstantial, it could be whatever, but 4s being drawn to that because of their sense of authenticity and because they recognize that each person is unique. Each person is individual and has value. They won't want to abandon people just because they're broken.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. On the flip side of this, there is the tendency of unhealthy 4s to self-sabotage and to rejecting positive relationships. I don't know if you have thoughts in terms of the contrast to embracing unhealthy relationships, but rejecting the positive.
Well, this is because they feel like they don't deserve it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at their core, and here's another list for us, 4s want to belong. That this is going to be a core desire, the desire to belong, and yet will settle for their uniqueness.
Right.
Thoughts on that? That list of we want things but we'll settle. They want identity.
Yeah, it's they feel like they don't have any significance, and looking out at the world and seeing the ways that other people fit in and they don't. The thing that they really want is to fit in. They want to have significance and value in the places where they live.
But as they are.
Yeah.
That's how it is. There's again that balance.
Yeah, because they feel like they can't get that.
Yeah.
The thing that they settle for is being unique.
Yeah, there it is. That's a good way to put that.
And oftentimes in standing out.
It's that the 4 has a sense of their own uniqueness. The grand win then would be for those around them to likewise understand their significance or their uniqueness. It's not just uniqueness. That's the wrong word. 4 has a radar for how they bring value and are special and have something significant about their life. They are not going to demand others know and acknowledge that, but would have that withdrawn longing for others to know and acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Isn't that how that would work?
Like they are not going to try and coerce. They're not going to demand the way that they look out and see that they don't fit in, so they step back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can spill over as frustration and hostility. Perhaps not even telling folks, hey, this is what I need you to acknowledge about me, because that would be inauthentic. They come out in this very different kind of way.
And it's the expression of the emotion that they're feeling in that moment.
Talk about that.
So I mentioned earlier that a lot of 4s will say that they feel like they are their emotions, because their emotions, their feelings, that heart space interpretation of the world and expression out into the world, because that is the first thing, then their raw emotion can come out in those ways.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that frustration of their experience, the frustration of potentially being put into a box or not being understood or feeling insignificant, that frustration can come out of them as raw emotion, which would be expressed in rage or hostility or pushing people away in those ways.
You want to get healthy?
I hope so.
The path for fours out of this into places of health ends up being a release. It's a release of your self-focus, release of your fear of insignificance. What does that look like for a four who's getting healthy?
Well, I think, like I said, a good contemplative practice is to stop spending time in the whirlpool of your emotions. So move into places where you're actually focusing on things outside of you, moving into ways that you sort of let go of your past, or at least not focus on it for a few minutes and focus on where you're at right now and where you might be headed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the bits of language TJ and I are going to start probably using quite frequently is that fears are the place where you start turning towards the shadow side of your type.
Mm-hmm.
But the holy idea ends up being kind of the first stepping stone in large measure for everything healthy for your type.
Yeah.
And the holy idea for the fours is holy originality, which needs to probably get unpacked.
Sure. Yeah. We did a whole podcast about this, so I highly recommend listening to that. But the originality for fours is this sense of, we've already talked about their internal sense of their own uniqueness. Holy origin recognizes that you are made for a purpose on purpose. It's this idea that each of us are individual and we have a purpose, and it is on purpose. And so when fours cultivate this, when they are able to really integrate the idea of holy origin into themselves, that sense of uniqueness is bolstered and also spread out in ways that really work to counteract that sense of deficiency. It's because you were made the way that you are on purpose for a reason, and that's inherently valuable.
I've said this a handful of times, and this is actually, there's probably 10 things I just say all the time, and this is one of them, but the living God could have created trillions of other universes without one extra person in them. And that person's you.
Yeah.
And yet, lo and behold, here you are.
Yeah.
You apparently bring something unique and special to this creation, and that's why you've been actualized by the only omniscient being. You bring something so significant that trillions of other possible universes were discarded and set aside as not having what it took.
Yeah.
Because here you are.
Yeah.
And there's
and
something...
out of the billions and billions of people that live right now and have lived for the entirety of history, there has not been another you.
Yeah. Understanding the value you bring, at least in the eyes of God, matters, because at the end of the day, if you get your value and significance from any other place, you're probably going to get let down.
Right.
Once someone understands that they have unsurpassable worth of that sort, man, that's freeing.
Yeah.
And
I hope so.
And that frees your heart, and it frees your heart to push into those. Some of the virtues come forth there for a four. So a traditionalist will have equanimity for the fours. That is, what is equanimity for the fours?
It's that idea that everything is different but has equal value. I am this person in this space for this time, and I bring these things to the table, and that is not more or less valuable than someone in Africa hunting giraffe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Although
why
you shouldn't
giraffe,
do that, but
why did I say giraffe? But like the qualities about me do not make me inherently more or less valuable than other people.
It is the absolute opposite of envy on that front.
Right.
The envy being judgment towards oneself that turns negative. Judgment always leads to bad places.
Right. Yep.
Garden of Eden, man, knowledge of good and evil, it's just it's the judgment tree. You're gonna
Yep.
go down some bad roads
Yep.
on there. But here it is, in terms of equanimity, you say everything has its place. I have
Mhm.
my place.
Yep.
I'm not more valuable than you, but I'm not nothing.
Yeah. I'm
And-
also not less valuable than you.
I'm going to love you
Yep.
as I love myself.
Yep.
These are all super healthy postures of heart.
Right.
Being able to advocate for oneself and to advocate for others in the beauty that they bring to the world around them.
Right.
Such a good.
Yep.
Healing attitudes for fours. This is again from Riso and Hudson. Maybe there is nothing wrong with me. Maybe others do understand me and are supporting me in the best way they know how. Maybe I'm not the only one who feels this way.
Yeah.
All those push into that same spot too.
Yep.
Which
And all of these are things that can be counteracted by working on that withdrawn stance. Like when
Yeah.
you step outside of your withdrawn place, you might start to see these things a little more clearly.
the thing that, and here's the road to joy, and it pushes off from the holy ideas and these healing attitudes, is the road for joy is just hearing the voice of God saying over you constantly, you are seen and loved as you are, and living out of that, living in these physical ways into
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
Fours who can move down that path, that unleashes healthy people.
Right.
When healthy fours are in our lives, what do they bring? What do they bring to us and to the world around them?
Well, we've talked about several of the things that I think are really valuable about fours already. They're very comfortable in those harder places. They're very good at being with us and helping guide us through those harder places. If you are going through significant grief, find some fours, man, that they will sit with you in the dark places.
It's the sensitivity of that.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about creativity with fours, and I don't want to lean too heavily on that because I have a different sense of what creativity means. Because it's not just like painting or singing or like it's not creating necessarily in the fine arts sense. This creativity has to do with figuring out ways to express something true that's never been done before.
Yeah. This is lacking in our experience and needs voice.
Right. Yeah. And so it can be done with painting, it can be done with songs, but it can be done in a lot of other ways. Creativity is about expressing the reality of our experiences.
Yeah.
And healthy fours can do that in a multitude of ways.
Healthy people begin to lead themselves and others. Obviously, healthy fours. There's many fours who are parents, teachers. What do they exude when they're guiding us forward?
Yeah, well, they bring us connection because each of us has value, and healthy fours can draw us all into that sense of value for everyone, and being able to see the differences and see the beauty of differences. Fours have they are very in tune with the beauty of the universe as it is, and want to draw everyone into that same sense of beauty.
Yeah.
And I think that's great and really valuable and something that's really needed.
Last book of the Bible is called The Unveiling or The Revelation.
Right.
That book ends with the world as it ought to be seen finally being unveiled in all its grandeur.
Yeah.
And that actually is something that the fours in our lives can do. And that's a leadership move. Here is the gorgeous, worthy thing before us. Let me paint it for you in its kaleidoscopic wonders.
Yeah.
And then let's go get it.
And let me Let me show you the way that I see what it could be.
Bang.
Yeah.
Any last words on fours?
No.
Hey, it would mean the world to us if you would pause, take 2 seconds and write us a brief review and give us some stars on your platform of choice. You can find us on Instagram at Around the Circle Podcast, but the best thing you can do is to share this episode with somebody that you love. If you dig our pop culture deep dives, you can help us select upcoming series at our Patreon page, which is linked on our Twitter. We are booking 2-day events for up to 250 people and leadership teams up to 20. If you have a venue and you are somewhere that we can access by a plane and you want to partner with us, we would be thrilled to talk to you. He's CJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. I'm Jeff Cook. And who you aren't isn't interesting. Be who you are, and you're going to set the world on fire.
Great word for fours.
Morning will come.